A very good morning to you. Today I'm willing to give all of you an insight into the field of astrology. Now, when we speak of astrology and astrological predictions, most of our society has got it all wrong. They think that it's used to, make predictions about the weather sometimes. They think that it's used to identify who's going to win the next election, who's going to be the next top politician, who's going to be the next top dog in the country. And they think that it can be used to, identify whether you will die tomorrow. Like that, most people got astrological predictions wrong. It's actually, yes, astrology is a pseudoscience, but there are a vast number of advantages that we can reap from the field of astrology onto our lives. For example, I believe in the individual horoscope of a person, the individual birth chart of a person. I personally believe that I don't believe in these false predictions that people come on media and then just to make themselves famous. What I believe is in an individual birth chart. What I believe is based on the birth chart of a person, based on his zodiac sign and the planetary combinations on each of those 12 houses, you can get an insight into what type of person he is. That's one. You can identify some traits of his personality. We've heard well-renowned psychiatrists sometimes stating that through astrology you can actually identify the psychological aspects of a person, and what you can identify, what the psychological aspects that you can identify through astrology is miles ahead of psychiatry. That's what some psychiatrists have stated about astrology in the past. So yeah, you can use it to identify the personality traits of a person, and other than that, there are various things that you can use astrology to identify about a person's life. For example, his educational talents, and what are the subjects that would give him most beneficial results, and also what type of jobs would suit him. Personally, I've seen in my personal field of astrology, when you take a person's birth chart, and we use the 10th house normally to state predictions about a person's job and what type of jobs would suit him. So I've seen a particular planetary combination stating that this person will do this type of job in the future, but he himself is not doing that job. He's doing some sort of other job. However, because his birth chart shows that he will do this type of job in the future, then at some point in life he will change whatever other job he was doing, and he will choose a job according to his planetary combination. His destiny will cause him to choose a job that is stated in his birth chart. So that's about jobs basically. And also it can used to identify some few traits of marriage, of what type of spouse you will be marrying in the future. And of course it can be used to identify about your children, about your gains, about your losses. And definitely one of the important branches of astrology is medical astrology. It is an intertwining between the field of medical science and astrology. We call it medical astrology. Medical astrology is such a vast subject which I will talk about separately in another video, all about medical astrology. So, but through medical astrology, we can actually identify what type of diseases a person is prone to, what type of diseases that he may be developing in the future. And according to my opinion, it is vital to know beforehand what type of diseases you will be prone to in the future, what type of diseases you are likely to develop in the future than developing them in the first place. Now in the field of medical science, most of the time that when we identify a particular disease for a person, this disease has already progressed. For example, say diabetes, most of the time when you identify a person with diabetes, it's already there and you can't cure it through your entire lifetime, you can only contain it. That's one classic example. Suppose another classic example like cancer. Sometimes when you identify a particular cancer in a person, it has already progressed to a vital stage of stage 2 or stage 3, and it could even turn out to be fatal. So my bold statement is, why not know these disease conditions beforehand? Will it do any harm? No, it won't. It will actually do you any good. And when we say that a person is more likely to develop this type of disease, a person is prone to developing this type of disease based on his birth chart, we don't say those to, frighten that person. We don't say those to cause an unnecessary fear in that person. We all say it out of love, so that that person can know it beforehand, and he can actually, do his best to avoid conditions that will lead to the developing of that disease, and he can actually avoid those predisposing factors which will lead to the enhancement of that disease. And of course he can stick to a few remedies as well, most even scientific remedies as well. For example, if we see that a person based on his zodiac sign and birth chart is likely to develop diabetes, type 2 diabetes, we would advise that person from a very young age to avoid foods that contain a large amount of sugar, foods that contain a large amount of carbohydrate, foods that contain a large amount of fat. And because of that, because now he's trying to be extra concerned of his diet, then he is less likely to develop diabetes than before. So now do you see where the importance of astrology lie? It's like a road sign, it's like a map. We use it to make predictions about a person's future, and when we make those predictions, we don't say them just to make ourselves famous. We say them, we show those predictions to that person so that he can get a clear view of his life, he can get a clear view of his path. And also I like to speak scientifically, unlike other astrologers. When I make bold predictions, I of course use the word probability or possibility. That means I normally speak scientifically and logically. That means when I make a bold prediction, I say that there is a high probability that this prediction will come true. There is a very high possibility that this prediction will come true. I don't say that I'm 100% sure you will develop diabetes. No, I'm saying you are very likely to develop diabetes in the future unless you stick to these remedies that will cause you to be extra concerned of your health and therefore not develop diabetes. Like that, I like to speak logically, speak analytically, and of course stick to remedies as well as to stick to some scientific remedies as well, as to what a person can do to prevent him developing a disease. And of course there are a million things that you can identify through the field of astrology, through a person's birth chart. There are like a million things that you can identify. Today I'm just going to touch on a few brief points. It is extremely difficult or extremely impossible to give a clear overview about the field of astrology in a video like this. We will be having more videos in the future where we will be discussing about several important branches of astrology. So on astrological predictions, now most people think they believe in personality traits based on their zodiac sign, which I believe is completely false. Yes, there are a few common traits that are unique to a particular zodiac sign. For example, if you say Aries, most Aries people are energetic. Yes, that is true. However, in a particular person, the ascendant lord of Aries, for example, the ascendant lord of a particular sign can be debilitated. What happens then? Then all the unique traits belonging to that zodiac sign will turn the opposite. For example, yes, most of Aries people are energetic. Yes, but if the ascendant lord of Aries, that is Mars, if Mars is debilitated, then those traits won't be there. So that is why I don't believe in personality traits based on zodiac signs. If you want to know traits about a person's personality, about his character, then you got to analyze his entire birth chart. Sometimes we must analyze his Navamsha as well, and then make bold predictions about his personality. So yeah, in astrological predictions, yes, we have 12 zodiac signs, and we have 9 planets. This is Indian Vedic astrology. We mainly stick to 9 planets that we use to make predictions on. That is the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, the North Node Rahu, and the South Node Ketu. So the North Node Rahu and the South Node Ketu are shadow planets, we say. They are not even actually present in this universe. So these 9 planets we use to make bold predictions about a person's birth chart. Uranus and Neptune, of course, they don't have that much of a significance in Indian Vedic astrology. Uranus and Neptune are important in Western astrology, which is somewhat different from our field. And yes, Pluto doesn't have any significance. So in our Indian Vedic astrology, we use these 9 planets to make predictions and to state a few traits about a person's life based on planetary combinations as well as the alignment of these planets in the birth chart. So what is the birth chart? Birth chart is like a map. It's like a particular map which we can use to identify all of the important chapters about a person. That means not the word chapters, but it's like a particular unique map that you can use to identify the important parts of a person's life. For example, in your birth chart, the birth chart is divided into 12 parts, into 12 houses. So each house has its own significance. Each house has its own significance, and each house represents a few traits. And based on the planetary combinations of that particular house, based on the planetary aspects of that on that particular house, we can state predictions regarding that particular house. Say for the education of, say for the chapter of education and love, the certain planetary combinations in the house of education and love, based on that we can state a few predictions about his education, his love and his love affairs, whether his love affairs will affect his education, like that. So we have 12 houses that we use to make astrological predictions about a person's traits. So the first house represents a person's personality. It represents a person's entire body. It represents his qualities. It represents his character, his wisdom, and of course it also represents his head area. Why do I say head area? Now I told you that there are 12 houses in this Vedic astrology. So each and every one of those houses represents a particular part of our body. So when malefic planets are placed in that particular house, it can give rise to diseases and other sort of, like, let's say, wounds and surgeries in that particular part of our body. So back to our conversation regarding the first house. So the first house represents a person's personality, his body, his character, the way he thinks, and of course the body part that the first house relates to is the part is his head, or should I say the superior most part of his body. So that is about the first house. When you move to the second house, which is a bit different, the second house we discuss, first I'll talk about the body part. In the second house we discuss about the ear, the nose and the throat and the face area. The area below the head, we discuss about the ear, nose and throat area. Other than that, we use the second house to identify about a person's speech. How long a journey can this person go based on his speech? Does he have talents in his speech? Can he actually talk his way out? So we used to make predictions about a person's speech and way of talking, whether he uses harsh words, whether he uses soft words. All of this we identify using the second house. And also the second house we say is the house of income. For example, what are the day-to-day methods that this person would use to gain money? What are the sort of methods of income that would suit this person? What are the methods of income that would not suit this person? So regarding money, and of course regarding bank accounts, regarding the money that you deposit on bank accounts, and regarding all of that, regarding all that income, we use the second house to make astrological predictions. In the third house, which is actually, according to Indian Vedic astrology, it's sort of a mild malefic. In other words, it's not as a strong house or a good house as opposed to the other houses. But somehow in third house we say it is the house of siblings. For example, based on the planetary combinations in the third house, we can identify whether this person is the elder sibling in his family and how many siblings this person has. So we call it the house of siblings. And also it is a house that is used to identify the born talents of a person. And another fact that is represented by the third house is short traveling. Say for example, you move to a foreign country for a very short period of time and come back. So that part belongs to the third house. And then the fourth house in astrology is quite unique. It is one of the 4 Kendra houses. The first Kendra house is the 4th house. The second Kendra house is the 4th house. The third Kendra house is the 2nd house, and then the 10th house. So the 4th house is one of the 4 Kendra houses. So in this fourth house, we used to make predictions about the property that a person has, about lands that he may be having, about the houses that he may be having, about other sort of materialistic properties that he may be having. That's one thing. And another thing that we used to identify through the fourth house is a person's relationship with his mother, is a person's relationship with his mother's relatives, that mother side of the family, that maternal part of the family. And another thing that we identify using the fourth house is a person's mind, like what is the way this person thinks. And of course, when you stick to that body parts, the fourth house represents that area in your chest. Actually speaking, the third area represents the superior part of your chest, which of course includes the lungs and that part of your neck. And the fourth house represents that area where your heart is placed, like the exact corners of your chest. All right, so that's about the fourth house. In the fifth house, this is another important house. The fifth house, we use fifth house to represent education, love, personal businesses, as well as the body part that is pertaining to the fifth house is that stomach area. So education, love, and the stomach area mainly we used to identify from the fifth house. And another significant factor that is identified through the fifth house is about a person's children, about how many children this person might have, whether he will be having energetic children or whether he will be having, well, basically on what type of children he will be having. So that's about the fifth house. In the sixth house, now sixth house is sort of a malefic house, we say in astrology. Sixth house is suppose, I mean, most of the planetary combinations on the sixth house will most of the time give malefic results. Why do I say like that? Because the sixth house represents disease. It represents the diseases that a person may be prone to. It represents the diseases that the person may be developing in the future. For example, if you have Venus in your sixth house, you are more likely to develop diabetes. If you have say Mars in the sixth house, Mars is all about cuts and bruises and wounds, then you are more likely to undergo several sort of surgeries throughout your lifetime. So the sixth house is the house of disease, and also the sixth house is also pertaining to a particular, like a unique body part in our body, that is the lower part of your stomach. The fifth house represents the upper part of your stomach, the sixth house represents that lower part of the stomach, which of course in females the uterus area is also pertaining to this sixth house. So certain malefic planets when placed on the sixth house in women, it can actually lead to like removal of the uterus, say because of a cancer also in females. That's about the sixth house. Then the seventh house, as we all know, seventh house is the house of marriage, is the house of marriage, and what type of spouse you will be having, what type of marriage that you will be having, and what is your relationship with your spouse in the future. And of course it is also the house where we used to identify how do you say, like partner businesses, or a person's business that he is doing, which of course includes businesses that he is not doing alone, but businesses that he is doing with the help of other people. We use the seventh house to basically talk about partnerships. It could even be your marriage, and even sometimes certain friendships. We use the seventh house to make predictions about partnerships and friendships, but basically it's the house of marriage, it's the house of your spouse, your relationship with your spouse, and what type of marriage you will be having. And if you pertain to the part of the human body, then the seventh house represents that area in your kidneys and your genitals, that area in your kidneys, your genitals, your anus, and that lowermost area in that sort of kidney and genital area. That's what the seventh house represents. The eighth house is also one of the most malefic houses in a person's birth chart. The eighth house, we say it is the house of death. In other words, you can get an insight into how this person will die. You can also get an insight into his lifespan sometimes. You can also get an insight onto, like, sometimes what is the method that will cause him to die. For example, there's a particular planetary combination. When placed in the eighth house, he is more prone to to die through an accident, like that. So eighth house, we say the house of death. And if you pertain to the human body, the eighth house represents that area in your spine, that posterior part, and that the area sort of like below your genitals also, your spine and that area. And then the ninth house is one of the best houses in a person's horoscope. We use the ninth house to identify whether this person is attached to his religion. We call the ninth house as the house of religion. We use the 9th house to identify whether this person is a full devotee to his religion or whether he ignores his particular religion. Because in astrology, most of the remedies that we give, they are pertaining to a particular religion. So in order to identify whether this person will take our advice and stick to those religious remedies, we have to look at his 9th house. So the 9th house represents religion, and also there's another significant factor that is determined by the 9th house, that is your higher education. Your higher education, as to what type of higher studies that you will be doing in the future, whether you will go abroad to do your higher studies. So that's what the 9th house represents. And when pertaining to the human body, the 9th house represents that calf area, that area below your genitals, also that calf area, the area between your genitals and your knees. That's what the 9th house represents. And then moving on to another house, that is the 10th house. That is also another significant house in a person's horoscope. The 10th house, which according to Indian Vedic astrology is, to be honest with you, one of the most important houses in a person's horoscope, because the 10th house is the house of occupation. It's the house of what type of job you will be doing, whether you will go abroad for your occupation. And also the 10th house you can use to identify a person's relationship with his father and a person's relationship with his father's relatives, that is the paternal side of the family. Like that, there are various number of things that are identified using the 10th house in Vedic astrology. And if you want me to pertain to the human body, the 10th house represents the knee area. So when certain malefic planets are placed in that 10th house, it can give results to wounds in your knee area, certain fractures, certain bruises, and certain problems in that knee area. And then another significant house is the 11th house. The 11th house, we say, is the house of gains. When I mean gains, I don't only mean money. When I mean gains, I don't only mean material gains. The 11th house of gains means your everything. It means your money, your property, the love that you receive through your parents, the love that you receive through your siblings, the love that you receive through your spouse, how you are recognized in the society. It's about your friends, your relationship with your friends, and like that. So every single gain that a person is likely to gain in his life, we use the 11th house to determine that. And of course, certain planetary combinations, when in the 11th house, we can get an idea into what type of businesses that would suit him. For example, Mars, when placed in the 11th house, those people are more likely to involve themselves in gem businesses, we would say, or certain businesses regarding gems or jewels or jewelry. So that's about the 11th house. If you want me to pertain to the human body, the 11th house represents that area between your knees and your ankle, or more significantly, that ankle area. So that ankle area is represented by your 11th house. And then moving on to the last house of a person's birth chart, that is the 12th house. That is the 12th house. We say now, we call 11th house as the house of gains. Now 12th house is the house of losses. All the things that I said through the 11th house, that's about gains. So the exact opposite of that, all the things that you gained throughout your lifetime, whether you will lose all of them, and what are the things that you will lose, those we use the 12th house to determine. So the 12th house is the house of losses. In other words, we use the 12th house to identify what are the ways this person would waste his money, whether he is prone to debts and not paying debts, whether he is prone to go to jail. Why go to jail? Because then most of his life, we say, is like a loss, because then there will be certain issues, because he's unable to earn money for his family, and because of that there will be losses of his property, and like that. It's about the house of losses, mainly losses of money. So it's also most probably a malefic planet in a person's birth chart. And also we use the 12th house to determine whether a person will go abroad. For foreign traveling, 12th house plays a significant part. And of course, if you want me to pertain to the human body, the 12th house represents your feet. The first house represented the superiormost part of your body, that is your head. The last house, the 12th house, pertains to your feet, the lowermost part of your body. So that's about the 12 houses. So basically, whatever astrological predictions that are made, and whoever astrologers make these predictions, they use these 12 houses. To make predictions. They use the planetary combinations on these 12 houses, the aspects that each planet receives through these houses. Any astrologer uses to make bold predictions. And of course, when I mean planets, I mean the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, North Node Rahu, and South Node Ketu. So these planets, when placed in these 12 houses, will give different results. So that's about. So now today I was able to give you an insight onto the field of astrology. So even for people who are willing to learn the science of astrology, this is one of the first lessons, what these 12 houses represents and what are these 9 planets. So basically, whatever predictions we make based on these 12 houses, which we will be discussing in future videos on how certain planetary combinations when placed in these 12 houses will give different results, and how these results differ from person to person. So yeah, so that's about it for today. So I just wanted to ask anyone who is willing to check their horoscope, anyone who is willing to check their birth chart of what are the important factors of their life, and anyone who is willing to take any sort of astrological consultation can always contact me directly through this number that is displayed in your screen, and you can contact me directly for astrological consultation service. Our service is available 24 hours. So I just wanted to state that, and of course wish all the best for all of your future endeavors. And so I wish you very good luck until we meet again. Thank you.